Hello my people them, it is your boy Toyin, and in today's video I'm going to take you along on a coding vlog and build a content management system or CMS for one of my clients. So before I get into the video, like, share and subscribe. Don't be a hater, and like the video and subscribe to the channel obviously. But yeah, I'm going to take you on this video. I'll provide a little bit of context of why I'm doing this and how I got here, and then I'll show you some of the code that I've written or some of the steps I'm going to take. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay, some very quick overview so that you don't waste your time with the video. Basically, the website was initially built using Hugo as a static site generator. I will be deploying the website using Netlify as a service, and then I'm using DecapCMS, or formerly known as Netlify CMS, as the CMS that I'm going to be integrating basically, and as like a GitHub integration so that every time a change is made to the CMS, it pushes the code or the new files, etc., up to GitHub, and then it links that way. Very quick tech stack. If you're using similar tech stack, you can follow this video and hopefully it's helpful. And if you're not, if you're using maybe a different static site generator, it should still be helpful because DecapCMS actually integrates with a lot of static site generators. So yeah. Okay, so let's get right into things. As I mentioned, we're running Hugo, so I'm just gonna run clear my console first, or terminal first, and then run Hugo server. So Hugo server spins up a local server for me. So I'm on localhost. Ignore the fact that the website looks a bit janky and some of the JavaScript's not working. It's not important. But I'm showing you here the portfolio section of the website. And this is the part that I'm building the CMS for, right? So this portfolio section, and very simply, is just a collection of images. And I'm doing this so that my client can upload images onto the website themselves rather than me having to do it, and also delete images. So in the code, I'm just showing you again the same part. So the portfolio section of the website is built using static images and then portfolio images, and it's just running through all of those images and displaying them onto that portfolio section. Okay, so now let's go over to DecapCMS and let's look at the documentation, because the documentation is really good and it tells you exactly how to set it up. Because I'm using Hugo, I'm going to look for DecapCMS with Hugo, obviously. Okay, so first things first, as I mentioned in this documentation here, need to create some things inside of the static directory. So I'm just going to create an index.html file and also a config.yaml file. So I'm just speeding this bit up because it's just following the documentation. Initially, I created the admin directory as per the documentation in the wrong place, right? I created it at the root, but I should have created that inside of the static directory because that's what the documentation told me. So I'm just moving that here. Right, so I've got the two files, the admin directory inside the static directory now, and it then tells me to copy this content for the index.html, and then we've got this config.yaml file. Now the index.html is very standard, so you can just copy that straight away. The config one is actually what determines what your CMS does, where it uploads images, what it looks like. So you have a media folder here, right? My media folder is probably going to be the portfolio, so I'm just changing that here. And then equally, the public folder is going to be just /images, but for me specifically image/portfolio. So I'm just changing that over. Now then, this is when I realized actually I am playing around with this because a lot of these fields mean specific things and they have specific functions. So rather than playing around with it too much, I'm just going to use DeepSeek, use ChatGPT equivalent, right? So I put in a prompt about creating a config.yaml template for me, and then I'm just going to use that basically. So whilst DeepSeek is creating stuff for me, quick note on using ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Bard, Gemini, whatever, if you're coding. So obviously use it if it's useful, but just make sure you kind of understand what is going on, because these things will often spit out code that just sometimes doesn't work or doesn't quite work. If you have no idea about what is going on, then it's basically useless. So that is basically my opinion on using DeepSeek. But definitely use ChatGPT and those things for coding, because why wouldn't you? Especially for creating templates of things or creating things that are very static. So I'm just looking over the results of what it created for me, this config.yaml template. Right, we have a collection images. There I saw, okay, we have a create true and also delete true, which makes sense. I want my client to be able to add images and also delete images. So that makes sense. I add that as well. And then we have a number of fields that it created for me. So these fields are the actual fields that will be inside the CMS. So I'm just having a look at what these fields actually mean. So if I scroll down here a little bit, yeah. So there we've got the title field, title for the image, alt, etc., etc. Now I realized then that actually a lot of these fields I don't actually need, because as I showed you earlier, the thing that I'm creating, it is just images, no title, no nothing, basically no caption, no date, etc. So I don't need a lot of these things. So after messing around for a little bit and going back and forth, as you can see here, yeah, I have an alt tag because it's an image, of course, but I don't really care for it, and I'm using the existing alt tag. So I'm just going to get rid of it, the alt, as well as that, the caption. I don't actually need the caption here. And the date. Again, don't need a date for any of these images because they're just plain images, nothing on them. Okay, so what am I doing now? I have the title for the image, so I will leave that as it is for now. And then I've got the actual image. So just saving that. Next, looking at what the DeepSeek kind of plan that it created for me. Looking at the steps to use the template. And then going all the way down, we've got configuring the Git gateway, accessing the CMS, and then displaying the image. Okay, that is great. Now, moving back over to the actual documentation. Right, we have gone through a couple of these steps. So I have created the config.yaml file, and now I can probably move on to the next step, which is just pushing things to GitHub and then deploying with Netlify. So I'm just going to cancel my server here, look at Git status. Okay, I've created obviously everything inside admin. And I'm just going to, and then here I just changed the branch because then GitHub, my branch is not main, it is master. And we'll kind of come back to this because you might notice that I haven't actually saved that change. So I've changed it to master, but I didn't save it. So I just pushed up my changes, right? So I added the admin file, config.yaml, index.html. I've pushed all of that up to GitHub as per the documentation. Cool. So then what's the next step? It tells you to add this script basically to the headers so that it can authenticate with Netlify identity. Great. So I just take that header, that script tag, and go into my headers now. Because of the way my partials are set up, etc., custom headers.html is present on every single page. So I can go into custom headers. You can see there's already a few scripts here. Paste that in. Save that, hopefully. Yeah. And then git add and git push it up to GitHub. And just writing some text. Always have a decent commit message, because when it comes back to it, when you look at it in a few months' time, you want to kind of have a decent history within your GitHub to look at. Now let's look at Netlify. So I'm looking at the actual Netlify. This is the actual website itself, right? So on the actual deploy website. Again, ignore the fact that it looks a bit janky. It's not too important. And this is the portfolio section. Going back to home, and then you can just close that up. You can see I've already connected my GitHub with my Netlify, so every time I push, it will automatically deploy onto Netlify. And now I'm just following the steps to enable the Git gateway and identity via Netlify from the documentation. So I go into identity, enable identity. Very simple. Now let's look at the documentation again. So once you've enabled that, you can go into usage, registration preferences, and then you can invite users, right? So inviting a user, which is obviously very useful. I need to create an account for my client so that they can log in and then do what they need to do. So go on to the registration preferences first. Change that to invite only because we don't want to just open for anyone. So then once you've changed it to invite only, you can then invite particular users. So I'm just going to invite myself. That's toyin@opionsoftware.co.uk and invite myself to be an admin or to have access to the CMS. And then just scrolling down to enable Git identity, I think it was called. Services enable Git gateway. Lovely. So that's connected now. That's enabled. Now in documentation, it tells you how to access the actual CMS. So it's the same address, everything is the same, and it's just /admin to access the CMS. So I'm spinning up my local server again, and I'm just going to follow this address provided to me. Open it up, and here you go. We have DecapCMS. Just rearrange my tabs real quick. Right, so we've got DecapCMS. We can log in with Netlify identity. We need to put in the URL of the actual page. So I'm just grabbing that now, or opening that here. And this is the actual URL for your website. Pasting that in, setting it. And then you should be able to log in to DecapCMS. Now, this is where I found my first issue. It says Git gateway backend is not configured properly. Now, I ran into this issue. I was struggling with it for a little bit to find out exactly what I had done wrong. If you remember, I mentioned earlier that while saving my branch and changing my config or YAML file, I changed the branch from main to master, but I didn't actually save it. So you can see on my config.yaml, the little dot there on Visual Studio tells you there's a file that's changed, but it hasn't been saved. So I'm basically here at this point, I'm just kind of messing around, trying different things, refreshing this, trying that. I went back to Netlify and looked at the user I created for myself to see if I had maybe misconfigured that. But the end solution that I eventually come to is that, hey, I made a boo-boo whilst just not saving my file. So I initially tried to, okay, let me just edit some settings maybe. Is there something wrong here? And this is all part of the process of debugging, right? You're always going to go through, things are always going to go wrong, and you're going to try a few different things. So it's good to go through this process, which is why I didn't want to cut it from the video. Might be boring for you to watch, but yeah, it's part of the process of developing something, of creating something. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to know what has gone wrong exactly, and you're going to try a few different things to fix them. So yeah, what I try to do is look at Netlify. I thought maybe there's something misconfigured on Netlify itself. Maybe whilst I was inviting my user, I had done something wrong. Maybe in enabling the Git gateway, potentially there was something wrong I had done. So I was looking at that for a little bit of time. Again, I couldn't really see anything. I didn't want to mess with it too much. And then eventually I decided to, okay, let me just try and log into DecapCMS via the actual URL, right? So previously I was using my local host. So let me log in via the actual website, if that makes sense. So I'm logging in here, adding my password and logging in. And you get the same method. So this here said branch not found. And that's when I was like, that's a light bulb moment. That is when I realized what the problem was. If you see my branch here, it's changed to master, but I just hadn't saved it. And that was the actual problem. So that is when I realized the issue that I mentioned about 4 or 5 minutes ago was the issue. Just by trying different things and getting the correct error message, which then lit a light bulb in my mind to realize what the problem was. So, okay, I made the change, saved my file, and then pushed it up to GitHub. And now, hopefully, once I run GitHub's Hugo server again, running on my local, run that, and here you go. I've automatically logged in. Happy days. And I can log out now if I want to. And if I look at my media, because this is set to static image / portfolio, it just shows me all of my portfolio images. Here I've got a collection which has a title and an image. You can see that from the fields I have, the portfolio images, right? So I could do that. And I thought, let me just create an image here. So I create a test image. I can click on the upload button just to upload an image. I'm just going to grab a random one and add that in. So you've got this blue sky image here. I'm going to choose that and create that and publish. And publish now. Now this is actually where I make my second mistake of this, and it takes me a little bit of time to realize this as well. So I've pushed this entry. I then run git status on my local because I thought, okay, it would be in my localhost, forgetting how DecapCMS actually works. So I'm running it locally, but once you make a change in DecapCMS, it actually pushes it up to GitHub, right? So my remote repository, as in GitHub, actually has further changes than the ones I have in my local, as in on my machine. I didn't make this connection. So here I'm wondering, hey, I've just moved on to the portfolio page. I can't see this test image that I've added. Why not? Right, so I'm expecting to be able to see this test image, even if it's in my local server that I'm running or in the actual code. I can't see any changes. Again, as I mentioned, I forgot how exactly DecapCMS works. It pushes it up to GitHub, which means that if you're working locally and you've got a change in your remote repository, you need to pull, obviously, and I didn't pull. So now I'm kind of just faffing around, wondering what has happened or what's going on. And it takes me a little bit of time to actually make that connection that I have changes on my remote repository that are not in my local repository or on my machine. So here I'm just showing you why I expected to see is this new image within this static image portfolio, right? So right at the bottom, I expected to see a new image of this blue sky, but I can't see it. I can only see the existing images there. And I do wonder how long I actually spent on this. I think it took me about half an hour, maybe 25 minutes to realize the mistake I had made. But again, as I mentioned, it's all part of learning. It's all part of coding. So here I just tried something a little bit silly, to be honest. I changed the folder from something to just static image portfolio and then just reran it. Now I'm logging back in. I canceled my server and I'm rerunning the server. So I'm basically just, the good old turn it off, try it on again, doing that whole thing again to see if maybe that has made a difference. And here again, I'm now publishing basically the same thing I'd published already to see if that had made a difference somehow. Obviously, it won't because I hadn't actually realized my mistake. And again, I'm faffing around expecting to see something that would reflect the fact I've uploaded this new image onto this portfolio section. So I'm running git status and seeing that there's been no changes. Okay, so again, I kind of choose, let me kind of abandon that position and let me go towards using the actual website. So I'm using the actual URL. I'm on it now. And here, then I go into portfolio and I can see, okay, test image. Everything's broken somehow, but clearly, whatever I uploaded via DecapCMS, something has worked, something has happened, right? So I'm at this stage, I'm a little bit confused because I can see something reflected in essentially in production, but not on my local server. And I think at this stage, I make the connection. Hey, if it's on production but it's not on my local server, then clearly at some point there's a disconnect, and that's because, as I mentioned, I am not pulling from GitHub yet. So I have things on my remote repository that are not in my local server, which is why you can't see them. But it's taking me like 10 minutes of this video to realize that. So again, I'm locally just pushing things to see what happens. I don't understand why this test image is not showing up on my local server. Running my git status at this point is when I realize, okay, I need to pull. And now I can see things have been pulled in from my remote repository. And I can see, okay, so the images has been added. It's also added a markdown file of this test image into the static directory of the portfolio. So you can see the actual blue sky image is there and also this markdown image. And that's when I realized, something's gone awry here, because I want to be able to upload an image and it gets added to the portfolio static image folder, but I don't want to then add a collection that adds this markdown file, because I don't need the markdown file. I just need the image. And that's when I make that connection. Whatever is within this media folder in the top left automatically gets added to my portfolio static images, and because it's there, it will automatically get shown on the portfolio page. So I do not need my collections. This portfolio collections, I can just get rid of them. So I've just deleted it, pulled again. It's gone rid of the markdown file. And now I can see, okay, cool. So the markdown file is gone. The actual image is there. And that's exactly what I want. So it's a little bit of a disconnect. I've got these fields. I literally basically don't need any of them. I don't want to be able to add a new collection, add new fields, because I only need this media folder. So I tried that, and DecapCMS, no, sir. You need to have a collection that has at least some fields. So inside the config.yaml file, right? So you can't create a DecapCMS kind of CMS without any fields, a collection without any fields. So that's when I realized that. Okay, fine. So I leave the collection, I leave the fields. Looking back at it now, I could probably just get rid of the whole collection, but hey. So I leave some of the fields. I have an image field. You can still click on new portfolio images, but what I will tell my client is that do not use this at all. If you want to upload an image, all you need to do is go onto media and then upload an image. I'm just going to try deleting the image from the media folder in DecapCMS to show the results as well. So I'm deleting the image, delete it now. If I go back onto my code, if I do git pull, and now looking at my images, that image is gone, right? So you've got 29.jpg, no images.jpg. Run my server again. Let's refresh this, and the image is gone indeed. So that is what I wanted, right? I want to be able to add images and delete images. I do not need to use this new portfolio images collections. That is just there for decorations for now. All I will tell my client is that if they want to add an image, simply add it to the media folder within this CMS. And if they want to delete an image, they can do the same thing. Of course, I can rewrite my code to be able to use this CMS more intuitively and properly, but I think for the purposes of what I need it for and for where the website is already at, and I'm not currently working on the website, I actually don't need to. It's more hassle than it's worth. So here, again, I'm uploading the images to the media folder, or the image to the media folder. Right at the top, you can see again, blue sky image. That is there now. And I can go into Italian connection, the actual website itself. You can see the image, right? That has been added to the website. So again, I'm back on the actual website. I'm just doing a couple of refreshes. So this is when I then deleted the image. So it's been disappeared, and just refreshing the actual website until it picks up the change. And there you go. So the reason it takes a little bit of time is that every time DecapCMS makes a change, it will push to GitHub. And once it's pushed to GitHub, it will get deployed to Netlify. And that takes a little bit of time. So that is why you see that kind of lag. So what I will tell the client, upload an image. wait a few minutes, refresh the website, and Bob's your uncle. Now I can just invite my client, add their email address, and invite them to the actual website, and we're done. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next one.